I caught my husband cheating. It's not something you see every day. Most people might confront their spouse if they find out they're cheating by checking their phone or something. But I saw it happen right in front of me in a place and time I never expected. I always had a feeling something was off with his relationship with someone else, but I never thought I'd actually see him cheating in public. My name's Christina. I stay at home with our 6-year-old son. The day I saw my husband cheating, he had a day off from work, and we planned to go out together as a family. But when I woke up, he was already gone. I got a message from him saying he was taking care of his sister, who had a high fever. He said no one else was home, so he'd be back in the evening. I felt disappointed. I had promised my son we'd go to an amusement park, and he was really looking forward to it. I knew my husband had been busy with a big work project lately, and he hadn't had a break in months, so this was supposed to be a rare chance for us to spend time together. But instead, he went to take care of his sister. She's engaged, so he could have let her manage on her own. But my husband has always been overly attached to his sister. He even told me he was attracted to me because I reminded him of her, which always made me uncomfortable. She's a lovely person, but being compared to her felt strange. My husband used to talk about wanting a son and daughter, and he used to initiate intimacy often. But since our son was born, that's changed. Now it hardly happens at all. We're still young, and he used to enjoy intimacy, so I'm worried he might be doing it with someone else. I understand. Forgiving someone for betraying your trust can be really tough. But what's even more frustrating is that my husband seems to vanish even on his days off, like today. It wouldn't hurt for him to spend some time with our child once in a while, right? Our kid adores him and gets upset when he's not around. But my husband seems indifferent towards our child. He doesn't bother with birthday presents or show up for school events. No matter how much free time he has, he often comes home early but just locks himself away to play games all day. He hardly even sees our son anymore. At this rate, our little boy, who used to be so close to his dad, might start feeling like he's just a stranger. And here's the thing, my husband keeps saying he's busy with some big project. But that's a lie. He's hardly ever home. So I asked an old classmate who works at the same company as him if my husband is really that busy. Turns out, my husband's not known for being a workaholic at all. People actually joke that he's more of a desk-warming employee who doesn't have much to do and always looks bored. He clocks out on time every day. Hearing this confirmed my suspicions. Despite claiming to be swamped with work, his paycheck hasn't changed much, and he never seems tired from working overtime. It just doesn't add up, and it makes me wonder if he's cheating. Feeling pretty frustrated, I finished making breakfast. When I checked the time, I noticed something odd. Normally, my son wakes up by 7 a.m., even if I don't wake him, but it was already past that time. If we didn't hurry, he'd miss the nursery school bus. So I hurried to wake him up. In his room, he was still fast asleep. I tried gently waking him by saying, "It's morning, wake up." But instead of a response, he let out a groan of pain. Worried, I reached out to feel his forehead. It was burning up. I called his name and gently shook his shoulder. He barely opened his eyes and said, "Mom, I can't breathe." My heart raced. There was an outbreak of a disease at the nursery school, and I couldn't help but wonder if my son had caught it too. I'd heard about kids dying from it, so I was seriously scared for my son's life. Feeling desperate, I tried calling my husband, but he didn't pick up. I couldn't wait for an email reply, so I reached out to my mom, who's a nurse, for advice. Following her instructions, I quickly made an ice pack and checked my son's temperature. It was really high, over 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. I called an ambulance and made sure my son drank plenty of water while we waited. My mom mentioned it might be a heat stroke, too. Because of infection risks, I couldn't ride in the ambulance, so I took a taxi to the hospital my son would be taken to. I kept trying to reach my husband, even though I knew it probably wouldn't work. And as expected, it didn't. So I left him a message online, hoping he'd see it and show up if he cared enough. At the hospital, I waited outside the emergency room, praying for my son's quick recovery. In the past, I lost my father after he was rushed to an emergency room. I couldn't shake the fear that the same might happen to my son. But my mom, who was there to support me, kept reassuring me, saying, "It'll be okay. It'll be okay." An hour later, the doctors managed to save my son, but they recommended keeping him in the hospital for a week for observation, so he was moved to a hospital room. But my husband still didn't show up that day. The next day, I went home to grab some clothes for my son and decided to bring him some fruit as a get-well-soon gift. I also wanted to thank the doctor who had helped us. As I passed by the emergency room, suddenly, the area erupted into chaos. I noticed the commotion and thought I might be in the way, so I decided to delay my thank you to the doctor. Just as I was about to head to my son's room, I saw a man and a woman on stretchers. They were barely covered with a thin blanket and looked almost naked. "It seems they're still stuck together," someone commented. "It looks like it happened during intercourse." I couldn't imagine how uncomfortable that must be, and being transported like that must have been incredibly embarrassing. As I tried to pass by, I made eye contact with the man. Normally it would have been an awkward moment, but this was different. I was stunned because the man was my husband. "What are you doing here?" I blurted out in surprise. Well, I caught my sister's cold, and my husband stumbled over his words. I was completely thrown off. What were the chances my husband would be here, especially right after my son was admitted yesterday? Why was he naked and being wheeled in? And who was the woman with him? My mind was racing with questions. In the midst of my confusion, I locked eyes with the woman beside my husband. Even in my haze, I knew she was his affair partner, and I shot her a glare. Her face looked strangely familiar, and then it hit me. Why is Christina here? That voice snapped me back to reality. Of course, the woman was my husband's sister, Brenna. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. I had suspected my husband of lying about taking care of his sister and meeting another woman, but this was beyond what I had imagined. Even if he came to see our son, showing up stuck together with another woman, especially his own sister, was just too much. Despite my urge to confront them, I had to hold back and wait for their treatment since they were being taken away on stretchers. I knew they couldn't escape, so I decided to address the situation later. With that in mind, I headed to visit my son, my initial reason for being there. But inside, I felt sick with worry. Spending time with my son helped me sort through my feelings a bit. When I checked my phone, I saw a barrage of messages from my husband online. As expected, he was trying to cover up the situation, not even mentioning our son being in the hospital. I chose to ignore him and waited a little longer. After a while, the doctor who had treated my son the day before came by. With a smile, the doctor said, "Your son is doing really well. He's recovering faster than expected. His fever has gone down and his condition has stabilized. We initially worried about an infection, but it seems he had heat stroke along with a cold." The doctor praised me for making sure my son drank plenty of water, saying I was a smart mom. But really, it was mostly thanks to my own mom. I made a mental note to get her some nice meat as a gift next time. I thanked the doctor sincerely with a deep bow. But despite feeling relieved about my son's health, I knew I was about to face a tough situation. As my anger simmered inside me, I quickly adjusted my expression into a smile for my son's sake. "Mama's not mad, sweetie. I'll be back soon," I reassured him. Leaving the hospital, I called my husband, who had left me over 100 missed calls. The moment he answered, he launched into excuses. "It's not what you think. There's a reason," he started saying. It struck me that he had his priorities all wrong. Shouldn't he be worried about our son first? Well, a man so wrapped up in an inappropriate relationship with his own sister without a care for our son wouldn't bother worrying about him. I thought bitterly. With a husband like that, I couldn't help but worry about our son's future. I couldn't see any change in my husband's behavior, so I made up my mind to divorce him. "You were too busy with that, even when our son was suffering, huh? I bet you found time for it whenever you please, even with your own sister." "It's sickening." I spat at him. He was left speechless. "And just so you know, I've already informed your parents. I won't involve your workplace, though. It'd be a problem if you couldn't pay alimony and child support." Goodbye with that, I delivered my final words to him. 3 days later, my son's health had fully recovered sooner than expected, so I completed the discharge process and returned home with my precious son. Of course, my husband was nowhere to be found. After that incident, my husband showed up in person to apologize, but I handed him the divorce papers I had already signed. He begged for forgiveness, pleading it was a mistake the first time. "Please just forgive me. You're everything to me." But in a stern tone, I told him, "You're still lying. Even now. I already know everything. Your sister confessed everything." I knew my husband wouldn't accept the divorce easily, so I first approached his sister, who was involved in the affair. "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding," I said to her. Thank you. I wanted to send you a message, but I thought of a better idea. Want to hear it? She replied. You're not going to tell anyone about this, right? She pleaded. Oh, I plan to. I want everyone to see who you really are. It'll be crystal clear, I said with a smirk. Please don't. It'll ruin my life, she begged. Pretending to think it over, I kept smiling. Well, I guess I could keep quiet if you tell me exactly how many times you were with my husband. Then we'll see. Though your brother will still feel betrayed. What's your choice? Without hesitation, my sister-in-law spilled everything. Please, don't tell him. I'll tell you everything, she admitted easily. When I confronted my husband about his affair with his sister, he was so shocked that he fainted. When he came to, he signed the divorce papers and left our home feeling defeated. I hired a lawyer to handle our divorce proceedings, demanding custody of our son, alimony, and child support from my husband. At first, he tried to negotiate the terms, but when I hinted at revealing more, he agreed to my terms and left the lawyer's office. Somehow, news of the affair spread to my husband's workplace, and he faced severe consequences. A month later, he lost his job and had to take up a job in a food factory, putting strawberries on cakes to make ends meet. At the factory, he became the subject of gossip among younger colleagues, making him feel uncomfortable. Meanwhile, despite me not revealing the truth, my husband's sister's engagement was called off, and her reputation suffered. It turns out her boyfriend suspected her of cheating, just like I did, and hired a private investigator. She had to pay a hefty sum as compensation for the broken engagement and now works at a nightclub. Recently, her ex-boyfriend gave me a photo of them together, saying, "Keep it in case you need it." I was taken aback by his audacity, but I stored it away just in case my husband tries anything. I'll use it if necessary. For a fresh start, I moved back in with my parents and am raising my son with their support. They're sad they can't see their grandson often, so they offer to help as much as they can. I'm grateful for their support, but I'll only rely on them when I really need to. It's amazing how my son has been in perfect health since that high fever, almost like it never happened. He's even received awards for perfect attendance for 3 years straight. He seems to have completely moved on from his biological father and is enjoying life to the fullest. That brings me more joy than anything else. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, our family has expanded with the addition of Angel, the white cat who's now comfortably sleeping on my lap. Angel used to visit our yard often before we moved, and when I went to bid him farewell, he hopped onto my lap and stayed there. I couldn't bear to leave him behind, so I brought him with me to my parents' house. Now he's become close with my parents, and he's just as dear to me as my son. Looking ahead, I want to witness my son's growth alongside my parents and Angel. As I sit here on the porch, gently stroking Angel, that's what fills my heart with warmth and contentment.